Hi everyone, Paul here. Welcome, and today I'd like to talk about de-essing and how S's can be super problematic if you don't handle them correctly, especially a lot of vocal recordings end up sounding like they couldn't have picked a worse mic for what's going on because let's say the overall tonality of a microphone is very dark and veiled, but the S's are just unbelievably harsh, bright, spitty, digital sounding, and it's the worst. Okay, so we're going to talk about that, and also later in the video, I'm going to talk about how I deal with nightmare S's and how I can really hone in and control the S's to sound at the end of the day amazing compared to how they sounded before I did total treatment to them using different tools and different techniques. So let's say you push up a lead vocal, you're in a mix and you push up a lead vocal, and that vocal just sounds okay, but it's kind of on the dark side. So you start dialing in some top end, some 8K, some 12K, some 16K, whatever it is you go for. And suddenly, to get the overall sound of the vocal nice and bright and present and exciting sounding, the S's are out of control. So usually what you can do is I tend to start off, people ask me, do you put the de-esser the first thing in the chain or the last thing in the chain? And my answer is yes, I do. I do everything that's needed, whatever's needed, many times both. So a lot of times I will start off with two de-essers at the first position of my inserts in Pro Tools, if I'm mixing in Pro Tools, which is what I do most times. I will start with a de-esser and I will dip whatever the main saturation of the S is. Usually it's one tiny place that's the most egregious, that really makes things really spitty and harsh sounding. So I will bring that down, and then after that I might do it again, sometimes a lower range, let's say from 3K to 6K, and another de-esser I'll focus from 7K to say 12K. Those are kind of like the two broad areas where I will adjust that. I may use something like a Lindell 902, which is really good to kind of do an overall top shelf dipping, because the reason why I like that one is because the Lindell 902, which is after the DBX 902, tends to soften the sound. A lot of these de-essers just bring down the volume, but they're very clean. They're very they don't do anything to help you soften harsh S's. Lindell does. Another one, as far as two bands, what I might use is the SPL. I think it's a Plug-in Alliance plugin, and that is the SPL de-esser. They have the original one. I tend to use the second one, which is two bands. They have the top end and they have the lower range stuff. So instead of using two de-essers, a lot of times you can really get a lot of the stuff taken care of with just that one de-esser. Sometimes I'll just de-ess the high frequencies, and sometimes I will, after that, use a broadband full frequency range from DC to light and just dip down the entire audio, which is like pulling down the fader without any certain area honing in on just the top end. Okay, that's something else I should bring up. When you bring up the vocal and you start de-essing or you start equalizing the lead vocal, listen to what the S's sound like. Are the S's that are now problematic mainly a high frequency sound, or is it just an overall thing you want to get? Because the S's themselves sound beautiful. A frequency spectrum on the S's sound very pleasing. They're just too loud. So in that case, you'd want to do the broadband dipping of the S sound. Okay? A lot of times, a dynamic equalizer will take care of the overall thing. While you're doing bumps and little dips of certain things within the lead vocal sound, a lot of times you can use the top end of a dynamic EQ, and just dip those down, whatever you need to take care of, and that too can really help out a lot. Okay? If you were to, in your vocal chain, if you were to put an EQ into a compressor and put the de-esser after that, that's cool, and that can be helpful for S's depending on what compressor you use. Some compressors, like say an LA3A, will actually help you because the attack is a certain way where it just kind of helps grab the S's and helps you out. Also the Lindell 902 at the end of a chain can be really helpful instead of taking care of everything in front or the front de-essing and at the end of the vocal chain. Sometimes just one really cool de-esser like a DBX 902 style de-esser, like that Lindell, will just soften the S's and get it so that you can get a really nice uniform controlling of your S sounds, okay? If you're going to choose to do equalizing after a compressor on your lead vocal chain, that can be a little bit tougher because that tends to make the S's, it doesn't help you at all, and it tends to make it a little worse, okay? So be aware of that. So let's say you've got that taken care of and everything's cool and it's a fairly well-recorded vocal and you can take care of it with normal de-essing, plug in at the front, at the end, or just at the start of it, however we're going to do with it. If that works fine, great. Now let's talk about nightmare de-essing situations, which unfortunately happen too often. Because keep in mind, when people pick a bad mic, or let's say a singer has a certain propensity to really accentuate the S's, and they're really spitty, and the S's sound just too shiny and glassy and snaky and distorted and pixelated and all this stuff, that can be a nightmare because remember, the tonality part of a lead vocal is completely different from the S part of a lead vocal. They're almost like two completely different instruments, right? So here's what I do when I've got a nightmare situation and I've got to really use a lot of EQ on a lead vocal. What I will do first, let's say you have the lead vocal track, I will go listen in mono, in solo I should say, to a lead vocal and just slice where every S is. I'll cut the front of the S and the back side of the S and just go through the whole song. Just cut all the way down, right? Now what I will do is I will create a additional audio track that I'm going to just put the S's on, right? So that's a blank audio track. The top part will be the tonal part of the vocal sound, and the bottom track will be just the S's. So on the top track, I've got everything cut. Now I'm going to do a batch crossfade. All the slices are there, but I'm going to use Pro Tools. I'm going to highlight the whole top all the way to the back of the track and do a bulk crossfade on every cut there is, okay? Usually 15 seconds long will be the crossfade, 10 seconds, a little wider, depending on the singer, depending on the tempo, depending on what the S's sound like. I'll just guess and go for like 15, okay? Sometimes 20 millisecond crossfade, depending. And what I will do, the reason why I do that first, even though I'm going to drag down the S's to their own track, is because when you now select an S after it's got the crossfades all across the song, for every S that I double tap, if I bring that down, that's going to keep the fade intact. So the top track will still get the fade out, right? But the bottom track below it will have the fade in, right in line with that. So it's going to be seamless crossfade in and crossfade out of those S's, which is great, okay? Now I'm going to take both those tracks and bus them to an additional aux fader. So both the tonal vocal track and the the S's, will be grouped together and bussed to a aux fader, mono fader, whatever. If it's stereo. But so now that's going to be all in one thing. That's where I'm going to be putting my overall compressor for any other global sort of tweaking I want to do, right? But here's where it gets good. Now I can EQ that tonal part as bright or as present or whatever I want to do, but now I have total control over the S's that are spitty, distorted, glassy, hissy, right? So what I do is first I drop that vocal down in level, okay? And I can automate those all through the track. If I have a really egregious one, I can just bring that down lower or whatever. But let's say I bring those down, say, 10 or 12 dB lower, right? I can EQ those S's any way I want. I can make them duller on the top end. Here's a big thing. I can saturate the vocal. If you get ones that are S's that are really pixelated and distorted, if I use something as simple as in Pro Tools, they have a plugin called Lo-Fi, there's a little saturation knob on that. And if I just set that to 0.2, 0.3 or 4, sometimes I've gone as high as 6 or 7 even, that tends to take the fragmented, pixelated S and make it whole again. It's unbelievable how good it can turn out. Then I can EQ it. I can compress it. I can do whatever I want and just find the right way to get it balanced and EQ'd along with whatever way I EQ the tonal part, or maybe I'm doing the overall EQ on the aux fader and I'm just tweaking the S's. This will save you so fully on taking a vocal that was basically, because of the S's, unmixable, into something that sounds pristine, actually sounds like perfection, shockingly, okay? So keep that in mind the next time you have an S problem on a lead vocal that is just making you crazy, because S's can really blow the vibe and slow you down and make things really, really tough. Also, you can do whatever it is you need to do in clip effects. Okay, let's say you don't want to go to dragging all the S's, which doesn't take a lot of time, actually. If you invest a good 10 minutes to do that, you'll have a lot of control. You may want to do it more often than just when you have a nightmare S situation on a lead vocal, right? However, I also, if I'm just going to touch up S's, because for some reason, sometimes depending on the distance of the singer from a microphone, if they go back and go move forward and whatever, the sound of the S's can change quite a bit. So if I'm really pleased with the overall sound at the end of the day, the vocals mixed in, I'm really happy with it, I will go in and EQ the S's just on the one vocal track. I didn't drag them down. I just kept it as one normal vocal track, and I will select the S's, and in Pro Tools, I use clip effects to equalize those S's to sound a certain way. A lot of times, one will be too sizzly or spitty. I'll have too much 16, so I'll bring the 10 and the 16, the 12K down, and I will push more the fundamental 3K, 4K, so I have a nice present S. In general, I like a good, strong S in my vocal. I think it adds excitement. It adds intelligibility to a lead vocal. And I really dig having a vocal right there, but they have to be controlled. If they're squirrely or inconsistent, it can really make things not feel right. Some mix engineers I've heard, they just control the S's so much that it sounds boring to me. So I just want to say that I really do like a nice present S a lot of times, which means I will bring down the sizzly part of an S and bring up more the 3K part, the 5K part, because I want a nice present vocal. I don't want a sizzly S. I want that excitement there if it's controlled, but I want that presence on an S. So I think I've talked about pretty much everything that I want to talk about for the S's. Happy mixing to you. Don't let the S's get you down. And until the next time, cheers, everybody.